Look at you, look at me, happy as we could be. I'll take a picture on my phone, so I will never be alone. So don't forget to say cheese on the count of 3 when I take a selfie. When I take a selfie, I snap a moment in time, I post it up online for all the world to see, and everyone can agree. No need for scenery, photogenic you and me in my selfie. When I take a selfie, so close to home or far away, or having fun on holiday.
Today's the first part of a brand new series called Me, My Selfie, and I. And before you get nervous about where this is going, this is not the beginning of a church-wide campaign to have everyone delete their Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat accounts. We're not going to talk about that. In fact, I'm not going to ask you to stop publishing pictures of yourself online. In fact, I really want to know that you're in the gym. Please continue to let us know that you're at Starbucks and so excited, hashtag for your favorite drink to come out. We still want to see pictures of you and your kids in a month when you're sending them off to school with the crying emoticons on the first day of school, or the happy party emoticons on the first day of school. We still want to see all of that. We're not talking about your selfies, but we do want to talk about something that the relatively new modern phenomena of the selfie teaches us about ourselves. It's estimated that about 2.5 million selfies are uploaded to social media every day, and when I saw that stat, I thought that is a lot of us that we are putting online. And while psychologists are just beginning to study what some of the long-term implications of a selfie culture might look like, the initial research is not really positive, to be honest. Their concerns are that it's going to lead to an increased sense of narcissism and self-objectification. In other words, we're training our minds to measure our own sense of value and worth based on how we look to the world and how many likes we can get on our social media pages. But I don't want to talk about that in this series, and the research is still coming in. We'll know more about that soon enough. What I want to talk about in this series is a tension that exists in all of us, whether you post selfies online or not. And I know there's a tension when we put selfies online because if we're honest, we don't put the full view of our lives online in selfie mode. I don't think any of you have ever published a selfie of you screaming at your kids. I don't think that any of you have ever published a selfie on an eternally long afternoon at work or of you vegging out in front of the television. Our selfies, I'm not saying they're fake, but I am saying they usually represent a very narrow spectrum of who we really are in our lives. They're always pictures that are of you smiling, or your makeup's all done up, or you're at the beach or some other cool location, or you're looking sexy, or the kids are behaving, whatever it is, and you carefully screen, delete, 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 delete. This one will work. Filter, 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 publish, right? We carefully screen what image of ourselves we put out there, but as soon as you put that image out there and the likes start rolling in, there's something that's true that you know deep in your heart, and what you know is there's a gap between selfie you and real you. There's a gap that exists between selfie life and real life. There's a gap that exists between who you really are as a person and how your life really is, and what you want people to think you really are, and what you want them to think about how your life really is. In fact, if you dig deep enough, what you know is there's a gap between who you know you are and who you think you're supposed to be. Now, while selfies are pretty new in the grand scheme of history, this tension that exists is nothing new. In fact, women and men have been struggling with this sense of inner tension for centuries and millennia. So in this series, we're going to learn the life story of a man who struggled with this inner tension. His name was Jacob, and he was a man who was constantly struggling in life. He was struggling with his brother. He was struggling with his parents. He was struggling with the hand that life dealt him. He was struggling with his in-laws. He was struggling with his circumstances. Jacob spent his entire life struggling. And the reason why we're going to look at his life is because he's a complicated guy in the Bible. In fact, he's a lot like you and me and your mother-in-law. But he's relatable, especially to Americans. He's a relatable character because when you look at his life, he doesn't have his life all put together, but it's this constant struggle. And the reason why we're looking at that is because it's not until Jacob gets to the end of his life when he realizes all of a sudden, all of his struggling, it hasn't been with his brother, it hasn't been with his parents, it hasn't been with his in-laws, it hasn't been with life. His real struggle all along, he finally realizes, has been with God. I mean, there's the superficial struggle, but then there's the real struggle. And here's my goal for you in this series. I'm inviting you to step into your own personal tension. I'm inviting you to step into the gap between who you want to be and who you really are. Between how you want people to see you and who you really are. And as we step into that tension and look at the life of Jacob, my goal is that you will learn to live at peace within that gap and more fully become the person, not that you think people, not become the person that people think you should be, but become the person that God made you to be. Well, the life of Jacob is one that begins with struggle. His whole life is a life of struggle. Today we're going to get started with his life story. And again, we're going to spend 6 weeks in this series. His story is so fascinating because he's such a flawed character of the Bible, which is why I like him so much. He makes me feel better about myself. We're going to start in Genesis chapter 25, beginning at verse 19. It says, "This is the account of the family line of Abraham's son Isaac. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel the Aramean from Paddan Aram, and sister of Laban the Aramean." Now, this means nothing to most of us. This will become an important detail later in the story. Don't worry about it now. I'll circle back to it when we need to know that important detail. But what you do need to know for now is that this is not a fairy tale beginning to a story. This is not once a long, long time ago in a land far away. This is, hey, these are some real people. They lived in real places at real points in history. And when the narrator is telling the story, there are enough people around, oh yeah, I remember that place. I've been there. I know that family. These are real people. This is someone's real life story. And it's the story that began with a man named Abraham. Last summer I preached through a series on the life of Abraham. It's on our website if you want to check it out. But Abraham was a larger-than-life figure who cast a very long shadow on history. In fact, although he lived 4,000 years ago, people still know him today. The three major world religions all trace their spiritual ancestry back to Abraham and claim him as their spiritual forefather. Christians, Jews, and Muslims all claim Abraham as a father in their faith. Well, Abraham didn't have any kids. Finally, his wife Sarah had a son when he was a very old man. His name was Isaac. And now Isaac, he's 40 years old. He's getting married. He's going to have some kids too. Here we go. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was childless. They couldn't have a baby. He was 40 when they got married, and she's not having a baby. It's not like he wants something for himself. It's not like he's being greedy or selfish. They're just praying, God, we just want a child. And we don't know if she miscarried. We don't know if she never conceived. We just know they didn't have a baby, so he goes to the Lord and he asks for a baby. Check this out. The Lord answered his prayer, and his wife Rebekah became pregnant. Now, you've heard the phrase, be careful what you wish for because you might get it. Rebekah's about to learn another adage, be careful what you pray for because you might get it, because she's going to get it. Here we go. The babies jostled each other within her. So, she goes in for her appointment, and she says to the technician, I think something's wrong. It doesn't feel right. So, she pulls up her shirt and they put the slimy goo on and they get the sonogram thing out. And the technician says, oh my. Ladies, you love that when you're getting your belly looked at. Oh my, what is it? Well, there's not a baby in there. There's babies in there. You're going to have twins. Some of you have gotten that news. It's like, yay? So you're going to have twins, and by the looks of it on the sonogram, they're already fighting. Yeah, yep, definitely wrestling. Oh, the little one just poked the big one in the nose. They're already wrestling with each other in utero. So already, one of these guys is Jacob. He's already struggling with his brother before he's even born. And at that point, Rebekah asks a question that every woman who has ever been pregnant has asked at some point between conception and delivery. And she said, ladies, you can read it with me if you want, why is this happening to me? Right? She says, why? God, I asked for a baby. Why is this happening to me? Rebekah's your patron saint, ladies. So she went to inquire of the Lord. Good thing. You don't know what's going on? She goes to ask God, what's going on in here? Why are these babies jostling? The Lord said to her, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you will be separated. One people will be stronger than the other. Now, at this point, it sounds kind of good, kind of bad. What God is saying is that your sons will become so wealthy, so prosperous, so fruitful, so successful, so abundant, they will each become the patriarch of their own separate nation. And that was going to happen. Jacob, one of the sons, he would become a patriarch of the entire Jewish race. And Esau, the other one, he would become the patriarch of the entire Edomite race. Okay, so 2 different nations are in you. They're both going to be incredibly prosperous, but the last thing would not have made any sense to Rebekah or to Isaac. He said, and the older will serve the younger. Now, here's why that wouldn't have made any sense. In ancient cultures, a person's primary goals in life were not centered on self. It wasn't about personal ambition, personal gain, personal success, or personal accomplishments. That's the modern Western world that we live in. Whatever you want to make of your life, you go out and chase your dreams and you live your life. In ancient cultures, it was all about family first. Because in ancient cultures, no one survived without family. It was all about the family's success, the family's ambitions, the family's hopes and dreams, the family's well-being. Because in the family, there was stability, and in the family, if your family was large enough and prosperous enough, there was safety, there was security, there was prominence in the world. Therefore, in ancient cultures, in all ancient cultures, they observed what was known as the custom or the law or the culture of primogeniture. Primogeniture simply means firstborn. The firstborn son represented the future of the family. The majority of the father's wealth and his estate was passed on to the firstborn son. The titles of the father were passed along to the firstborn son. He was the one who became the head of the family. He was the one who became the head of the clan. He was the one who became the head of the tribe. If you wanted to do legal business with anyone in the family, you did it with the firstborn son. He represented the family. In their culture, in their world, that's just how it worked. If you're the firstborn, you are the man. You become the next family leader and the most important member of the family. But God says to Rebekah, not for you. The younger one will serve the older one. So she would have gone home wondering what this meant, and she would have talked it over with Isaac, and they wouldn't have understood what this meant, but here's what happened. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. Sure enough, just like the Lord said. The first to come out was red, and his whole body was like a hairy garment. Now, I just want to pause for a second here. I know that parents are supposed to think that my baby is the cutest baby who has ever been born, and grandparents always think my grandchild is the cutest baby that has ever been born. But this had to be kind of freaky. I'm not going to lie. I mean, the midwife takes the baby and she puts it in Rebekah's arms and says, "Congratulations, it's a healthy red Ewok. Here you go." That's just, what is that? What's wrong with my kid? And Isaac could be looking at Rebekah like, I don't know what's going on there, but just this freaky thing. And so it says, they named him Esau. Esau is the Hebrew word that sounds like the Hebrew word for red. So maybe they had a nice name planned. We'll name him Isaac after his father, or Abraham after his grandfather, or a nice name like Joseph. This baby's born Red. Is Red, that's just his name. We're going to call him Red. That's our kid now. Whatever they had planned, it all blew up at that moment. That's not all. His twin's going to be born. After this, his brother came out with his hand grasping Esau's heel, so he was named Jacob. Jacob is the Hebrew word which means the heel grabber, which was also used to describe someone who struggles, someone who wrestles, and someone who deceives. Because if you're in combat with your opponent, you do something deceptive like grab him by the foot and trip him to gain an advantage. Jacob is his name. So whatever they had planned, you're red and you're a heel grabber. That's so, just there you go. There's your names. Last note here, Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. Now, I just want to pause. I'm not preaching on this today, but some of you need to hear this today. How long were Isaac and Rebekah praying for a child? 20 years. It's not like he prayed on Monday and next Friday the pregnancy test was positive, all right? This is 20 years of unanswered prayer. 20 years of crying out to the Lord. 20 years of pleading with God. 20 years of fighting. 20 years of tears. Some of you quit praying too soon. You were praying for something. God didn't answer. You quit praying. 20 years. Okay? That's just free. You don't have to pay for that one today. So they've got twin boys, Esau and Jacob, and already from the womb, they are struggling with one another, and Jacob is struggling with Esau. Now, if you're a person who doesn't believe in original sin, what that means is that we are born sinful. If you're a person who believes babies are born innocent and pure and holy and blameless, all that tells me is that you have never raised a 2-year-old child. That's all that tells me. And if you don't believe the devil's real, all that tells me is you've never raised a teenager, but that's a different sermon for a different day. Jacob is born, and already it's a me first mentality in the heart of Jacob. Right? You don't have to teach little children how to say mine. You have to teach little children how to share. Jacob shows who he is out of the get-go. Jacob's a great name for this guy because he's already showing what's in his heart, which is, I don't want to be born second. I want to be born first. I deserve what's coming to me. I deserve primogeniture. I deserve to be the firstborn. I deserve the dignity and value and honor of the family. He is grabbing his brother, not wanting him to be born first. That's Jacob already as he's born, before he's born, struggling with his brother. The boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was content to stay at home among the tents. Isaac, who had a taste for wild game, loved Esau, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Now, the narrator included this on purpose because he's setting us up for a lot of family drama and dysfunction that are going to come. We'll get into more of that next week, but the narrator's setting us up for that. Now, in that day, everyone wanted to be Esau. He's strong, he's a hunter, he's skilled. He looks like Chewbacca now, with his crossbow, hunting animals. He's rich. He's related to the most influential person that region has ever known, Abraham. This is his grandson. His father Isaac is loaded with wealth and prosperity, and as the firstborn, he's going to inherit most of that. He's going to become the leader of the tribe, the leader of the family. Esau has an incredible future ahead of him, doesn't he? Man, everybody wanted to be Esau. Everybody wished they could be Esau. Man, that guy's awesome. He parties hard. He's this dude. He's a charter member of the NRA. He's just all that. That's Esau. But Esau had something inside of him. He had something inside of him that had the potential to overthrow his entire future. And here's why I want to talk about this today, and here's why this story is worth the price of your attention. This has just been introduction so far. Now the sermon begins. God, look at me, God has a future for you. It's amazing. But you have inside of you, like Esau, something that has the potential to overthrow the future that God has planned for you. We're going to see what that is in the next verse. Once, when Jacob was cooking some stew, Esau came in from the open country, famished. He's a big man. He has a big appetite. He said to Jacob, "Quick, let me have some of that red stew. I'm famished." That is why he was also called Edom. Another Hebrew word also sounds like another word for red. So that's his legal name and that's his nickname. He's red. That's Esau. He sees the red lentil stew and he wants some. Esau has something inside of him that has the potential to overthrow his future, and what he has inside of him is an appetite. Now, I want to zoom out from the story a little bit because we're going to talk about us for a little bit. All of us, as human beings, have appetites. Now, when you think of having an appetite, of course, predominantly you think of food. You get hungry physically for food. You have an appetite for food. But as human beings, you have all kinds of appetites in your life. You have an appetite for acceptance. And some of you thought you would have been over that by the time you got done with high school, but you just turned 30 years old and you're still wondering why you weren't invited to the party, or you saw two of your friends at the coffee shop and you're wondering why they didn't text you and tell you to come along. That's your appetite for acceptance, and it wants to be accepted by others. You have an appetite for progress. You want to see things move forward. You want things to move up and to the right. You want to have more wealth next year than you do this year. You want to see the ball move further downfield. You're hungry for that. You have an appetite for intimacy. See, because if you're single, probably you wish you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You're hungry for intimacy. And if you feel you have a good boyfriend or a good girlfriend, maybe you desire engagement. And if you're engaged, you're hungry for intimacy. You want to be married. And if you're married, eyeballs up here, if you're married, you're probably hungry for a stronger marriage. You know why that is? Because you have an appetite for intimacy. You have an appetite for respect. You want other people to look at you and admire you and appreciate you. That's an appetite you have. You have an appetite for things, for material possessions. For some of you, you like cars. For some of you, you like shoes. Whatever it is, you have an appetite for stuff. There's a few things you need to know about your appetites. Number one, God created them. Okay? God made you a physical creature, and He made you to run on food. He made the appetite for food. Okay, God made you a sexual creature. He made you a spiritual creature. He made you an emotional creature. He made you hungry for intimacy. God made you in His image, which means He made you to work and to see things move forward. So you have a desire for that. He made a physical world with material things, and He blesses you with material possessions. You have an appetite for that. God made the appetites, but sin distorts your appetites. Doesn't it? You are hungry for food, and instead of satisfying your appetite in a wholesome, healthy way, you reached for the pint of ice cream. God created them. Sin distorts them. You are hungry for intimacy, but you settled for sex. God created it. Sin distorts it. You were hungry for progress. You settled for shortcut and cheating. God created it. Sin distorts it. That's what's true about your appetites. That's why appetites will determine the outcome of your life. Because although they were created by God, sin has distorted them. Second thing to know about appetites is this. They always scream, "Feed me now." They're not content to say, "Oh, if you're not busy, feed me, but if you're busy, that's cool. I'll just be quiet over here." That's not what appetites do. If you're hungry after church and you go to the restaurant, you get into the parking lot and you open your car door and the smell of grease hits your nostrils, the appetite doesn't say, "Oh, that's cool, we're about to eat. I'm going to quiet down now." What happens to your appetite when it smells the food? It gets louder. Already with newborns, you've got a bottle, it's 2 a.m., you're going to feed the baby, you've got the bottle, you're shaking it, you're holding the baby's already crying because it's hungry, it hears you shaking the bottle, it sees the bottle, and the baby says, oh, good. Snack is here, I'll just chill out until my mom finishes getting the bottle ready. I'm cool. Is that what the baby does? It screams louder because appetites scream, feed me now. Let me tell you how powerful this is in your life. Your parents ended up where they ended up in life because of their ability or their inability to control their appetites. In fact, here's what we're going to see in Esau's life and in our life. Your ability or inability to manage your appetites will determine the outcome of your life. Isn't it true? Isn't it true that because you had appetites that were distorted by sin and screaming, feed me now, you have done something stupid? Have you ever done something stupid because of an appetite? Have you ever done something irresponsible? You guys are leaving me hanging out to dry up here. Not me, Jason. We should take away his microphone. Bad preacher. Have you ever done something irresponsible because of an appetite? Have you ever done something ungodly because of an appetite? And some of you, you're like, I don't even know what ungodly is, but if I were to guess, like, this is godly and this is ungodly, yeah, what I did was ungodly. Listen, your ability or inability to control your appetites will determine the outcome of your life. And Esau has a raging appetite. And his inability to control it and manage it is going to undermine his very bright future. Here's what happens. Jacob replied, first sell me your birthright. Esau says, I'm famished, give me some stew. Jacob says, sell me your birthright. Now the birthright is part of that law of primogeniture. When a man died, he would cut his estate up into equal pieces, and he would make one more piece than he had sons. So Isaac has 2 sons. When he dies, his estate will be cut up into 3 pieces. Jacob gets 1 piece. Esau, as the oldest, gets a bonus piece. Esau becomes the legal representative of the family. Esau has all the prominence and respect in that culture. Jacob says, sell me that. You want my bowl full of beans? Sell me your birthright. Now, Esau, you can see his appetites have taken over at this point. What does he say? He says, look, I am about to die, Esau said. What good is the birthright to me? Now, he's not about to die. He wasn't carried in on a stretcher. He's just hungry and his appetites are screaming. There's food somewhere else in the tent, but he just says, no, I need that. The birthright's no good to me. I'm about to die. Next verse. But Jacob said, swear to me first. So he swore an oath to him, selling his birthright to Jacob. Now, I want to try to capture the essence of this, and I can't quite do it, but I'm going to try and illustrate it. Who here has a car that you really enjoy? This is not a preacher setup. I'm not going to you're not going to pay for it. Go ahead. Who has a car that they really, really enjoy, and you're thankful that you have the car? Real high, real high, real high, real high. What kind of car do you have? Okay, he has a Dodge. Tell you what, I've got a Hope pen. I will trade you my Hope pen for your car. He wants door number 3. He doesn't want the pen, right? You're like, why would I trade my car for a pen? I can steal one of those every Sunday. I don't need, I don't need your pen. That's a horrible trade. Who in the world would trade their car for a pen? Jacob says to Esau, you want my beans? Sell me your birthright. We're like, that's the dumbest deal in the history of deals. Who in the world would sell their birthright for a bowl full of beans? Who in the world would swear, fine, you get 2/3 of our father's estate, you get all the dignity and value of culture, I'm going to eat the bowl of beans? Who would be dumb enough to make a deal like that? You would. And so would I. For the right bowl of beans that your appetite is hungry for. God created them, sin distorted them, they scream, feed me now. Here's what happened. Then Jacob gave Esau some bread and some lentil stew. He ate and drank, and then got up and left. So Esau despised his birthright. No candlelight, no music. Just devoured his bowl full of beans, and then he left. He sold his birthright for beans. What's the moral of the story? Well, here's what we see so far, at least, from the life of Esau. If you're taking notes, you can fill in this blank. Your appetite will gladly trade the ultimate for the immediate. Esau had the ultimate. He traded away for the immediate in his life. Here's another way to say the same thing. Your appetite will gladly surrender what you want most for what you want now. Okay? Think about it this way. In your life, what's the ultimate? In your life, what do you want most? As you look into your future, what's the ultimate future for you? What do you want most in your future? When you look at your finances, what's the ultimate for you? What do you want most? When you look at your relationships, what's the ultimate? What do you want most? Okay, when you look at your career, at what you produce, when you look at your entire life, what's the ultimate? What do you want most? When you get to the end of your life and you answer to Jesus for your life, what do you want most, really? What's the ultimate for you? You need a clear picture of that, because here's what you need to understand. Your appetites, they will trade away what you want most. They will trade away your ultimate for what is immediate. They will trade away your future for what your appetite demands you give it now. And do you know what the insidious thing is about an appetite? It's not going to be satisfied. You will trade away your future, and it will still demand more. Have you ever eaten so much at Thanksgiving dinner that they had to get out a dolly and wheel you away from the table, put you on the couch where you watched football for 2 hours while you had an aching gut because you ate so much? Don't leave me hanging this time. Who's done that? And you thought to yourself, I'm not going to eat for 3 days. And then the pie came out. Well, maybe, right? That's what appetites do. Your mom said, no, you can't have a snack before dinner. You said, why? You'll spoil your appetite. Liar. It comes back. And when you trade away what you want most, your appetite's not going to be happy. It's going to come back. And it's going to demand more of your future. And it's going to demand more of what you want most. And it's going to demand more of your ultimate. It will demand you trade away your birthright. Even if all you get in return is beans. You're like, Jason, okay, great. But I don't live in an ancient culture, and I'm not a firstborn son to some very wealthy man with a bright future ahead of me. No, you've got something bigger and better in your future. You have a birthright. Peter talks about it in the book of 1 Peter. Chapter 1, he says, in God's great mercy, because God is merciful, okay? You've done stupid things, irresponsible things, godless things to satisfy appetites in the past. Because of God's great mercy, He doesn't give you what you deserve. He has given us a new, a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. You have your family by birth, and you inherit whatever they have for you, and whatever birthright comes from that family. And for most of us, that's nothing too special. But you've been given a new birth. You have a new birthright, and it comes from God Himself. Look at how he ends this verse. And into an inheritance that can never, let's go back to that last verse, into an inheritance that can never perish, spoil, or fade. You have a new inheritance and a new birthright. And Peter says that about this inheritance is kept in heaven for you. Peter, it's like he's thinking about Jacob and Esau, and he says, don't you realize that because Christ came and lived on this earth and died on the cross and rose on Easter, you can be born into a new family, the family of God, where God is your Father, and He has a birthright for you. And you have an inheritance in heaven that can never be taken away from you, can never perish, it can never fade. Last week, if you missed, Pastor Mike was here from Appleton, and man, did he preach it about getting into heaven and just seeing the glory of the face of God and being filled with satisfaction and joy and peace and pleasure, and everything we've ever desired, everything we've ever hungered for in our lives will suddenly be fulfilled. The reason why God made you with appetites is so that ultimately underneath all of that, we would see that we're hungry for Him. We're hungry for His presence, and nothing else can satisfy. You know how when you're hungry for something and your appetite's raging and you fill it with the wrong thing, it always leaves regret and emptiness? Okay, you're hungry for food, you go to the pantry, oh, that sleeve of Oreos looks good, and after you're done, you're not satisfied, you're empty. It's regret. You desire intimacy, you settled for sex, after you're done, not satisfied, it leads to emptiness, leads to regret. We're hungry for God. We're hungry to see Him. That's the only thing that will quiet your appetite. And Peter says that is your inheritance. And it's kept for you. And it will not spoil, and it will not fade, and it will not be lost, but you can trade it away for a bowl of beans. It's just beans. Look at what the writer to the Hebrews said when warning people about this. He said, see to it that no one is sexually immoral or is godless like, and he's like, who illustrates this? Who would be dumb enough to trade away their future with God and the future God has for them for something stupid? Esau. Or is godless like Esau, who for a single meal sold his inheritance rights as the oldest son? Verse 17 continues. Afterward, as you know, when he wanted to inherit this blessing, he was rejected, even though he sought the blessing with tears. He could not change what he had done. Don't be godless like Esau. He sold his future for a bowl of beans. And I've got a question for you. What happened to the beans after Esau ate them? See, this is the stuff I think about while you do real work all week long. It's a pile of crap. He traded his future for a pile of crap. What about you? I'm worried about you, church. I care about you. But some of you, you're trading your birthright for something that in a year, 10 years, 100 years, it's going to be a pile of crap. And you gave away God's future He had for you for it. Let's fill in this blank. Your appetite will gladly trade your birthright for beans. Esau's did. So will yours. So what are you hungry for? Not you general, I mean you. What are you hungry for in this season of life? What is your appetite crying out for? And are you meeting it with God and in a way that honors Him? Or are you letting your appetites, which have been distorted by sin, cram your mouth full of Oreo cookies or the equivalent thereof? How do we overcome that? Because the reality is, you can't check the I went to church box and your appetites all go away. You can't pray real hard at the end of the day and your appetites are going to go away. You're going to have them, and you're going to have to learn how to manage them because they're going to always be there. How do we learn how to control our appetites? Esau couldn't do it. But he points us to the one who does. You see, there was another firstborn son who was beloved by his father. There was another firstborn son who rightly deserved all the glory of the family name and all the honors and riches that came along with it. There was another firstborn son who was tempted to give away what he wanted most for something immediate, and the name of this firstborn son was Jesus, the firstborn son of the Father. And when Jesus was baptized, he went out into the desert where he fasted, and Satan came and tempted him. He said, why are you trying to do this the hard way, man? Why are you suffering like this for them? You want people to love you? No problem. You bow down to me. I'll make all the peoples of the world bow down to you and love you. Why go to the cross for them? He spoke to things that Jesus had an appetite for. He was hungry for food. He said, turn these stones into bread. He was hungry for the world. And he said, I'll give it to you. Just bow down to me. But when Jesus was tempted, do you know what he wanted the most? The glory of God and eternity with you. Do you know what the ultimate thing was for Jesus? The glory of God and eternity with you. And when he reframed his appetite according to what the future held for him and for you and for God's glory, he refused the beans. And he honored God. And he went to the cross, and he died for our failures to manage our own appetites, to forgive you. He says, I know you failed. I know you've been governed by your appetites, and it's been too long. Come to me. I've got grace for you. I've got mercy for you, and I've got a new appetite for you, and it is to see God's glory. It's going to change everything. Look at what Paul wrote in Romans chapter 8. He said, for those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. In other words, he wants you to become like Jesus, that he, Jesus, might be the firstborn, here's our firstborn son, among many brothers and sisters. He says he's going to be the firstborn. He's going to have a lot of brothers and sisters, and that's going to be his church, the people who believe in him, the people who love him. Now, let me get real practical with our last little bit of time together today on how you get control of your appetites and manage them so they don't control you. Imagine that you could go back in time. Great Scott, you could go back in time right as Jacob makes this pitch to Esau. You want some of my red beans? All right, sell me your birthright. Imagine you could go running into the tent and say, Esau, time out. Can we have a word, buddy? Come here. We're going to have a word. Here's what you need to know. The son of Isaac who receives the birthright is going to have 12 sons. And they're going to become a great and prosperous people. But then when disaster comes, they're going to move to Egypt where they're going to find security, but they're going to become so numerous that an insecure Pharaoh is going to rise up and he's going to say, we need to imprison and force these people into slavery, and they're going to cry out to God like Isaac cried out to God for deliverance. They're going to cry out to God for deliverance, and God is going to raise up a man named Moses who's going to go and free all of the descendants. And when Moses says, who are you and who should I tell them is sending me, did you know that God is going to introduce himself by saying this? He's going to say, who am I? Well, I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. Buddy, do you know that this is an early chapter in the biggest story ever told, and someday billions of people, what's a billion? It's a number bigger than you need to worry about right now, Esau. Billions of people are going to know the story of Jesus, and his story is going to be connected to your story and the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Esau. Esau, buddy, this isn't just about your financial future. This isn't just about your cultural future. This is about the future of the world and your ability to be forever linked to Jesus. But no one was able to pull him aside and reframe it that way for him. And when you are hungry, no one is going to reframe it for you. And your appetite's going to scream, feed me now. So when it does, here's what you do. To refrain from your appetite, and this is not theoretical. This is, you know how you're trying to meet a hunger in an ungodly way in your life right now. That's what I'm talking about, all right? I'm not talking about abstract. I'm talking about your proclivities, your temptations to sin. to refrain from your appetite, reframe your appetite. You need to reframe this whole thing. Your appetite only sees what's right now in front of you. You need to zoom way out and say, what's the future God has for me? What's the future God has for my life? What's the future God has for my life on earth? What's the birthright that is waiting for me in heaven? You need to zoom out and see, what is God's preferred future for me? And let your hunger for Him grow bigger and bigger, so that when your sin-distorted appetite screams, feed me now, you can push it down. Say, I have a bigger hunger for something else. I have a bigger hunger, and it's for God's glory and to see His face. I have a bigger hunger, and it's for glorifying God with my life on earth. Little hunger, you keep quiet. I'm going to get this hunger truly satisfied. So some of you, in your life today, your appetite's been trying to satisfy itself on some unhealthy things. It's just beans. You need to look at it and say, I don't need to cheapen myself for this boy. That boy's just beans. That's all he is. I don't need to compromise, cheat, or take shortcuts for this progress. That's just beans. You know, this popularity that I think I need, that's going to go away. That's just beans. I mean, if the stew had meat in it, this would be a very different sermon, but it was just beans. Find your satisfaction in Jesus. Let me pray for you. Father, thank you for preserving this incredible story from Scripture. There's so much wisdom for our life. Jesus, thank you for knowing what your ultimate thing was. And it was God's glory, and it was eternity with us. And your hunger for that got you through temptation, and it got you to the other side. Thank you for giving your life for our sins. In our lives, give us that kind of perspective, Jesus. Give us that kind of wisdom for the man or woman who has just been losing to their appetites, who is controlled by their appetites. I ask that today would be a new day where they would know that you are not mad at them, you have grace for them, you have strength for them, and they can run into your open arms. May our appetites for you grow larger. May our appetites for your kingdom grow larger, so that we will not be a people who are ruled by our appetites, but we will be a people who are hungry for you. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.